White woman calls cops on black kid regrets it when his mum, the governor, arrives. A single phone call can change everything. And on a sunny afternoon in Boston's historic Beacon Hill, that's exactly what happened. A distressed white woman dialed 911 after spotting a young black boy collecting signatures on the sidewalk. She insisted he was up to no good. When the police arrived, what seemed like a routine complaint quickly unraveled into a whirlwind of shock and regret. Little did she know, the boy's mother was none other than the sitting governor of Massachusetts. Soon, an explosive confrontation cast the entire neighborhood into the spotlight, with media cameras rolling and a hard lesson looming for everyone involved. It was a breezy spring afternoon on Acorn Street in Beacon Hill, one of Boston's most picturesque and affluent neighborhoods. The old cobblestone pavement hummed with the footsteps of tourists snapping pictures of the gaslit lanterns while residents walked their dogs or hurried back from the local bakery. Azaleas and tulips blossomed in neat row house gardens, giving the area a postcard-perfect appearance. Overhead, the sky was a clear, brilliant blue, and the warmth of the sun felt like a tender promise of better days after a long, cold winter. At the corner of Acorn and Willow, a lanky 12-year-old boy named Marcus Wilson stood with a clipboard in hand. He had neatly braided hair and wore a simple T-shirt that read Boston Pride. He was engaged in what should have been an ordinary extracurricular activity, collecting signatures to help support a bill aimed at funding after-school programs in underprivileged communities. This wasn't just any random cause. Marcus was passionate about ensuring kids his age from lower-income families had a safe place to learn, create art, and even play sports after school. Having learned the value of civic duty from his politically engaged family, he was determined to make a difference, even at his young age. Yet all was not tranquil in this cozy scene. Across the street, on the stoop of her impeccably restored red brick townhouse, sat Alicia Harrington. A longtime resident of Beacon Hill, Alicia was known for her sharp tongue and a watchful eye that never missed a thing in the neighborhood. She was the kind of person who had the local precinct's non-emergency line saved in her phone, just in case. Over time, she had developed a reputation for being the self-appointed gatekeeper of the block. Bird feeders had to be hung in the right way. Kids' chalk drawings on the sidewalks had to be scrubbed off by morning. Noise was measured in decibels that she felt only she could judge acceptable. As she sipped her piping hot latte from a nearby Starbucks, a bright green logo on the disposable cup, her brow furrowed at the sight of Marcus. Something about him made her uneasy, though she couldn't have said exactly why. From her vantage point, she saw him approach passers-by, politely greet them, and inquire if they had a moment to sign his petition. Some paused to converse with him, while others politely declined. His entire demeanor was calm and respectful, but to Alicia, he was an unfamiliar face in her neighborhood, and that alone set her on edge. Sensing an opportunity for confrontation, or at least a chance to exercise her perceived civic duty, Alicia rose from her seat and moved down her stoop. She was wearing a tailored navy blue blazer over a crisp white blouse, and her blonde hair was perfectly styled. She carried herself with an air of confidence that bordered on superiority. Approaching Marcus, she stopped a few feet away and offered a tight-lipped smile. "Excuse me," she said curtly, "what are you doing here?" Marcus, though somewhat startled by her abruptness, responded politely, "I'm collecting signatures for a bill that would increase funding for after-school programs. It's to help keep kids safe and active when their parents are at work. Would you like to sign?" Alicia's eyes narrowed. She glanced at his clipboard as though expecting to find something suspicious. "Are you from around here?" No, ma'am. I live in Cambridge, but my mom works around the State House sometimes, and I thought this neighborhood would be a great place to gather signatures." That last sentence triggered a flicker of recognition in Alicia's mind. Beacon Hill. was quite close to the Massachusetts State House, after all. But she remained skeptical, seeing only that he was an unfamiliar black kid roaming her block and bothering passers-by. Rather than listening to what Marcus was actually saying, her mind spun scenarios of alleged wrongdoing. "I'm sorry, but we don't need people soliciting strangers on our streets," Alicia declared. "This is a quiet neighborhood. I don't feel comfortable with you bothering residents. Do you even have a permit for this kind of activity?" Marcus blinked, a little confused. He'd done this many times, handing out flyers and collecting signatures for various causes with his family or through school clubs. Never before had anyone asked him for a permit. "1. I'm just asking folks if they're interested. There's no money involved, and I'm standing on a public sidewalk," he responded, trying to remain respectful. "You might think it's a public sidewalk, but it's—" Alicia started. She cut herself off, unsure of her own logic, then quickly pivoted. "I'm sorry, but I can't allow this. You're making people uncomfortable." Marcus looked around. The only person visibly uncomfortable was Alicia herself. A sudden wave of anxiety washed over him. He'd read stories in the news about situations that escalated for no good reason. He sensed this could be one of those moments, and he had no desire to be a cautionary headline. He inhaled slowly, trying to remain calm. "I'm only here for about another hour or so, ma'am. If you'd prefer not to sign, that's okay. I'm not hurting anyone, I promise. You can't just decide what's right or wrong for my neighborhood," Alicia snapped, raising her voice. "I think you need to move along, or I'll have to call the police. We'll see what they have to say about you harassing people." At the word police, Marcus's heart skittered. But he'd also been taught never to let bullies trample on his rights. Holding his clipboard to his chest, he said, "I'm not harassing anyone. I've been polite." "You can call them if you want, but you won't find anything I've done wrong." Alicia smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Fine," she said, taking out her phone. "Have it your way." She dialed 911, intentionally putting it on speaker. The operator answered, and Alicia's voice took on a trembling quality that made it sound as though she were in distress. She described a suspicious young man loitering on the street, mentioning that she felt threatened and that the child was confrontational. The operator tried to clarify the circumstances, but Alicia's tone remained urgent and alarmed. By the end of the call, she had effectively portrayed the situation as if a menacing figure were lurking outside her home. Within minutes, the red and blue glare of police lights flickered at the end of Acorn Street. A single patrol car pulled up, and 2 officers emerged. They approached slowly, scanning the area. Onlookers had begun to gather, curious about the commotion. Beacon Hill was no stranger to police presence, but it was typically associated with official convoys heading to the State House or the governor's mansion, not with a tense standoff on a residential street. Alicia hurried over to them, describing again how threatened she felt, and pointing an accusatory finger at Marcus. The boy tried to approach calmly and explain his side of the story. The older of the 2 officers, Sergeant Klein, asked Marcus for his name, age, and reason for being there. Marcus answered each question politely, showing them the petition forms. At first, the officers seemed skeptical of Alicia's version, especially given Marcus's calm demeanor. But because a call had been made, they had to proceed. The second officer asked Marcus if he had any ID on him. Marcus produced his school ID card. The tension hung in the air like a thick fog, with Alicia watching smugly, arms folded, as though expecting the child to be hauled away. But that's when everything changed. The older officer radioed in Marcus's name and date of birth as a matter of procedure. A few minutes later, the dispatcher responded with a surprising note. "Subject is the son of Governor Tonya Wilson. Repeat, the boy is the governor's son." Sergeant Klein did a double take, looking at Marcus more carefully. Marcus nodded, feeling the surge of relief and a simultaneous twinge of dread. He hadn't wanted to use his family's position as a shield, but circumstances had now forced it to the forefront. "Marcus, your mom is Governor Wilson." Sergeant Klein asked, more softly. Why didn't you mention that? Marcus shrugged. I wanted to collect signatures just like anyone else who cares about the cause. It shouldn't matter who my mother is. The younger officer stepped back in alarm, mindful of the potential political repercussions. Meanwhile, Alicia's expression darkened. She was still fixated on the idea that the boy was up to no good. What does it matter if he's the governor's son? He was still trespassing on my street and making me feel uncomfortable. The mention of the governor seemed to embolden Alicia's sense of grievance even further. She raised her voice. I don't care who his mother is. The law is the law. In the midst of this chaotic scene, onlookers whipped out their phones to record the unfolding drama, capturing every second of Alicia's tirade. By now, neighbors and even passing tourists had gathered around, forming a circle of murmurs and disapproving stares. A wave of recognition swept through some of the crowd. Governor Tonya Wilson was a well-respected leader, known for championing social justice and youth initiatives. The entire situation felt like it might escalate into a media fiasco at any moment. Suddenly, a sleek black SUV pulled up. The back door opened, and out stepped a tall, poised African-American woman in a tailored grey suit. Tonya Wilson, the newly elected governor of Massachusetts, exuded an air of authority that seemed to immediately shift the energy on the street. She had the kind of presence that made people pay attention. Photographers and reporters who had somehow caught wind of the commotion began snapping pictures from behind the perimeter of curious onlookers. Marcus! The governor called, her voice steady and concerned. She moved swiftly to her son, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Are you all right, sweetheart? Marcus exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. I'm okay, Mom, he said, unable to hide the relief in his eyes. He glanced toward Alicia. She called the cops. Tonya's gaze shifted to Alicia, whose face had turned a deep shade of red. Whether from embarrassment or continued indignation, it was impossible to say, but the tension still clung to the air. The governor looked to the police officers. Sergeant, is there an issue with my son collecting signatures for an after-school programs bill? Sergeant Klein cleared his throat. Not from what I can tell, Governor Wilson. We received a call reporting suspicious behavior, but so far, the boy's story checks out. There's nothing illegal about peacefully asking passers-by for signatures. Alicia, seeing her moment to double down, stepped forward. Governor, I'm sorry, but your son was loitering around, asking strangers personal questions. I felt threatened, especially given, she paused, choosing her words carefully, the environment these days. Tonya Wilson's eyes narrowed slightly, noticing that Alicia refrained from explicitly mentioning race but couldn't hide the implication. I understand your concern for safety, Miss. Alicia Harrington, the woman replied, trying to adopt a measured tone, but her voice quivered with a mix of fear and frustration. I've lived here for 20 years. This neighborhood has always been safe. I was just doing what I thought was right. Tonya nodded, stepping closer. I respect that you want to keep your neighborhood safe, but from what I see, my son was peacefully exercising his right to gather support for a cause he believes in. May I ask what specifically made you feel threatened? Alicia hesitated, her gaze darting around as though searching for an escape route. Cameras flashed from the crowd. She certainly did not want to be remembered as the woman who caused a scene with the governor's son, but the trap had already sprung. It's unusual. A kid I've never seen before approaching people out of nowhere. You have to understand there's been a lot of crime in the city. The governor's voice was calm but firm. Beacon Hill has one of the lowest crime rates in the area, and even if there was an issue with crime, my son's clipboard and petition hardly seem like a threat. But you know what does concern me? People placing 911 calls that waste police resources and potentially endanger children who are doing nothing wrong. Alicia opened her mouth to respond, but found no suitable words. The crowd murmured in agreement with the governor's subtle rebuke. Tonya turned to the officers. "Thank you for responding promptly, but it appears this was a misunderstanding. Please, let's not escalate it any further." Then she looked around at the onlookers. "As your governor, I encourage everyone to respect each other's rights and exercise caution before involving law enforcement in trivial matters. Our officers have enough real emergencies to handle." The tension in the air began to dissipate, but the drama was far from over. Alicia stood there, uncertain how to salvage her pride. The police officers exchanged looks, quietly returning to their cruiser. They had no grounds to detain Marcus, nor did they want to perpetuate a fiasco that involved the governor. Alicia, feeling the scorching glare of onlookers and the lens of multiple cell phone cameras, tried one last tactic, an apology laced with self-righteousness. "I'm sorry if I overreacted," she said, lifting her chin in forced contrition. "I was just looking out for my neighbors. I do hope you understand that I had no idea he was your son." Governor Wilson's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's precisely the point," she replied. "No one should have to be my son or anyone special to be treated with basic respect and fairness." Alicia's cheeks blazed with humiliation. "I'll remember that," she whispered, though the sincerity in her voice was questionable. With that, Tonya placed a gentle hand on Marcus's shoulder, guiding him away from the scene. The crowd parted, offering murmured support and nods of admiration. Some even approached Marcus, now curious about the petition, eager to make a statement of solidarity. Within minutes, Marcus found himself with more signatures than he'd collected all week. But the consequences for Alicia Harrington were just beginning. By the next morning, local news stations had picked up the story. A wave of social media outrage followed, fueled by cell phone footage showing Alicia berating Marcus and calling the cops. People demanded accountability, labeling Alicia's actions as a racially charged misuse of emergency services. Journalists dug into Alicia's past, unearthing previous complaints she'd lodged against her Black and Latino neighbors, a father teaching his son how to ride a bike in the street, a group of college students hanging out in a courtyard, a local busker playing guitar on the sidewalk. Each time, Alicia had called the police or other authorities, citing suspicious or unruly behavior. Soon, Alicia found herself the subject of public scorn. Memes of her circulated online, comparing her to other infamous Karen incidents across the country. She received harassing phone calls and hate mail. Some local businesses refused to serve her. While she lamented the harassment, the public and many neighbors viewed this backlash as karma for her unyielding, racially tinged vigilance. Meanwhile, talk radio and national news programs highlighted the story as part of a broader discussion on racial profiling. Governor Tonya Wilson, though not initially wanting to exploit the situation, was compelled to address the matter at a press conference when a reporter asked her about it. "I've seen the video. My heart aches for every child who faces prejudice when trying to make a positive impact on their community," the governor said. "Our hope is that this can be a learning moment about the harmful consequences of assumptions and the importance of measured caution before calling law enforcement. It is my goal to pass legislation that ensures accountability for false or frivolous 911 calls, which disproportionately target people of color." The proposed legislation drew enthusiastic support from many corners of Massachusetts, but it also drew fierce criticism from those who felt such a law would discourage genuine reports of crime. Tensions flared in the state's political arena. While many recognized the moral imperative of preventing racially biased emergency calls, others argued that the measure would lead to underreporting of legitimate issues. In the midst of this escalating debate, Alicia attempted to salvage her reputation. She appeared on a local morning talk show, Good Morning Boston, to explain her side of the story. The segment opened with Alicia dabbing tears from her eyes as she recounted how she received threatening messages. She claimed she wasn't racist, she was just overly cautious. The hosts politely questioned her motives, pointing to her track record of calling the police on people of color in her neighborhood. Alicia squirmed under the scrutiny, failing to provide convincing answers. One of the bigger twists came when it was revealed that Alicia worked as a consultant for a well-known non-profit focusing on education in underserved communities, an organization ironically championing the very cause Marcus was fighting for. When the non-profit's executives learned about her involvement in the 911 call fiasco, they swiftly called an emergency board meeting to address the public relations disaster. Days later, Alicia was quietly let go from her position. A statement was released, stating the organization's commitment to equity and justice, and acknowledging that recent events made Alicia's position untenable. The news hammered another nail into Alicia's already tarnished reputation, fueling more public chatter about the stark hypocrisy in her actions. Her neighbors in Beacon Hill were sharply divided. Some expressed empathy for Alicia, suggesting she had been overly demonized, while others felt a sense of relief at her downfall. A few that had once tolerated her meddling ways saw this as a chance to distance themselves or re-examine their own biases. As for Marcus, he suddenly found himself thrust into the public eye. Requests for interviews poured in, and classmates recognized him on the street. Some teased him with the moniker Governor's Kid, while others saw him as a local hero who exposed injustice. Marcus felt conflicted. On one hand, he was proud of the attention his cause was getting, but on the other hand, he never wanted it to happen at the cost of humiliating someone, even someone who had judged him so harshly. Governor Wilson tried to shield Marcus from the media frenzy, emphasizing that he was still just a child. She restricted interviews and turned down offers for Marcus to appear on national talk shows. But she did support his petition wholeheartedly. With the momentum generated by the incident, Marcus's after-school program bill garnered more signatures than anyone expected, enough to elevate it onto the legislative docket for serious consideration. A few weeks after the Beacon Hill confrontation, Governor Wilson scheduled a private meeting with Alicia Harrington. The intention was to address the broader issue of racially motivated 911 calls. Alicia arrived at the State House, trembling with a mixture of anxiety and defiance. She wasn't sure if this was a formal meeting or a trap. Was she about to be publicly shamed again? Ushered into a tastefully decorated conference room, Alicia faced the governor's calm stare. She noticed a row of framed photographs lining the walls, depicting Massachusetts governors from the past. The largest and most recent portrait was of Governor Wilson herself, beaming confidently in front of the State House steps. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," Alicia began. She tried to sound composed, but her voice wavered. The governor took a seat, gesturing for Alicia to do the same. "I appreciate you coming," she said. "I want to start by saying that I don't hold personal grudges, but this incident has brought a spotlight to a very serious issue. You became the face of a problem we can't ignore." "I never meant for any of this to happen," Alicia said. "I overreacted. I was trying to protect my neighborhood, but," she sighed, looking at her hands folded on the table. "I understand how it appears." Tonya Wilson leaned forward. "Perception is part of it, yes. But the reality is more important. Kids, especially black kids, are too often seen as threats, and that can have life-altering, even fatal consequences. What if the responding officers had been less measured? What if the situation escalated?" Alicia swallowed, her guilt intensifying. She had replayed that scenario in her mind 100 times. "I know. I realize how easily things could have gone wrong." The governor nodded. "I invited you here because I'm drafting a bill. We're calling it the Responsible 911 Act. It includes penalties for knowingly making false or racially biased emergency calls. It also sets guidelines for community-based conflict resolution and mandatory training for frequent 911 callers. Alicia's eyes widened. I suppose I'd be the first to need such training. That's the idea, Tonya replied, without malice but with unwavering clarity. The question is, will you join us in helping shape this legislation? In a way, you could help right the wrong by sharing your perspective and assisting us in creating guidelines that might prevent future incidents. Alicia's face burned. She felt a swirl of emotions, shame, guilt, confusion, and a strange sense of relief. I'm willing to do whatever it takes, she finally said, her voice small. I can't change what I've done, but if I can help keep it from happening again, I'll do it. Governor Wilson stood, extending a handshake. Thank you. I believe in accountability, but I also believe in second chances when they're genuinely earned. With that, the two women shook hands. Alicia was left with a heavy sense of responsibility. She walked out of the State House feeling the weight of her actions, but also a flicker of hope that she could somehow turn this humiliating episode into a lesson for herself and others. In the months that followed, Alicia attended meetings with advocacy groups and community leaders, helping to draft the guidelines of the responsible 911 Act. She listened to stories of people who had endured racially charged emergency calls. Some had faced arrests, job losses, or public humiliation. She began to grasp the real damage that a single phone call could inflict. Marcus, meanwhile, continued to thrive. With the governor's measured support, he spoke at a few youth events about his experience, using it as a rallying cry to promote civic engagement. He and his fellow students gathered thousands more signatures, and their after-school program bill advanced in the legislature, attracting a broad coalition of supporters. On a crisp fall day, the Responsible 911 Act and the after-school program funding bill were both scheduled for debate at the State House. After hours of passionate testimony, the legislature passed both measures. Crowds of community activists, parents, and media personnel erupted in applause. Alicia stood quietly in the back of the chamber, tears forming in her eyes as the final votes were counted. She hadn't instantly redeemed herself in the public eye. Many still viewed her with suspicion. But she had come to accept that genuine change was not about winning public approval. It was about taking responsibility and working toward progress, one step at a time. Later that evening, Governor Wilson hosted a small reception in one of the State House conference rooms to celebrate the legislative victory. Alicia was invited, though she arrived late, unsure if she really belonged among the cheering supporters. She spotted Marcus near the refreshment table, fiddling with a congratulatory balloon someone had given him. Alicia approached him timidly, clearing her throat to announce her presence. "Hey," she said, offering a small smile. "I just wanted to say, congratulations on the bill. It's a big deal." Marcus nodded politely, though his eyes held a mixture of caution and kindness. "Thanks," he replied. "It feels good to see people come together for something positive." Alicia swallowed. "I'm sorry for what I did to you. I know I've apologized before, but I want you to know I really mean it. I was wrong." He gave a small shrug. "You don't have to keep saying it. I've heard it. And, well, I forgive you." His gaze drifted to the floor. "Just don't do it again." Alicia nodded, tears threatening to spill over. "I won't." For a moment, they stood there in a fragile, mutual understanding. Moments later, Governor Wilson entered the room, accompanied by legislators and journalists. She caught sight of Alicia and Marcus talking quietly. With a nod of approval, she invited everyone to gather for a group photo. Alicia hesitated at first. She was no hero, and she knew that. But she was also no longer the same person who had made that 911 call months ago. As the camera flashed, capturing the newly forged alliances and the triumphant celebration of democracy at work, Alicia realized that while her own journey was far from complete, she had taken the first necessary steps toward genuine growth. Sometimes it took public humiliation and a harsh reckoning to truly see the harm in preconceived biases. In the end, the real transformation wasn't about shifting public perception of Alicia Harrington, but about Alicia Harrington shifting her own perception of herself and the world around her. Thank you for watching this gripping story of how a single phone call escalated into a defining moment for an entire community, and how unexpected twists can lead to unexpected growth. If this story resonated with you, or if you're inspired by Marcus's and Governor Wilson's stand against injustice, we invite you to take action. Share the message that bias has no place in our neighborhoods, and that empathy can turn even our darkest mistakes into moments of healing. Let's remember that true change begins with each of us when we choose to challenge our assumptions and stand up for what's right. If you enjoyed this dramatic retelling, please give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment with your thoughts, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss future stories. Your support helps keep these stories coming. Let's keep the conversation going.